Hey everyone, welcome back. Today, we're doing something a little different. We're diving into the world of 1960s Norway.
But not for the fjords or Vikings, though.
No fjords this time. We're going behind the scenes of Norsk Data.
Often just called ND.
Yeah, ND, a tech company that, well, they went head to head with some big names like IBM.
It's a wild story, really. Inspiring and a little bit of a cautionary tale. Full of twists and turns. I think you'll find it fascinating.
I think so too. So to get into it, we've got some excerpts from this book, Norsk Data, What Went Wrong.
Catchy title.
Right. And some online resources about ND itself and a bit about, the history of computing at the time. What we're trying to figure out is how did this little Norwegian company become such a powerhouse and then,
And then they just vanish.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy.
I think what makes it so relevant even today is they're operating in a tech landscape that was constantly shifting, much like the one we're in now, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. Okay, so imagine this. It's the 1960s, and the world of computing is basically these, massive mainframe computers.
Huge things, yeah.
Mostly from, American companies. But over at the Norwegian Defense Research Establishment, there's this team of engineers, and they're starting to see the potential of something new.
Something called mini computers.
Right, mini computers. Now, these weren't the mini PCs we picture today.
No. Think smaller, more specialized systems.
Okay.
And this is where some key figures emerge. Lars Monrad Krohn, Per Bjerg, and Rolf Skår. They weren't just, tinkering around. They developed the SAM-1 computer, and that was really the foundation for everything India would go on to do.
So they had this spark of innovation, right? But then they had to figure out, okay, what do we do with these mini computers?
Right. What's the practical application?
Exactly. And they quickly realized that process control was a huge opportunity.
And by process control, we're talking about using computers to manage complex systems. Things like power plants, factories, even scientific experiments.
Right, exactly. And you need a super reliable, robust system for that kind of work.
Oh, absolutely. It's not like you could just hit Creel plus Alt plus Delete if something goes wrong.
Not at all. And they actually had a chance to prove just how robust their systems were with the Tamer project. This wasn't your average IT deployment. ND's computers were used to control a massive icebreaker ship navigating the Arctic, extreme conditions, critical operations, and
ND's tech performed flawlessly.
Wow, talk about pressure. But the story that really got me was their deal with CERN.
The European Organization for Nuclear Research.
Yeah, that's the one. They actually outbid IBM for a major contract. How did they manage to pull that off? We're talking about a tiny Norwegian company going up against, IBM.
It's a combination of factors. Technically, their systems were top-notch, especially for the specific scientific needs of CERN. But what really set them apart was their customer-centric approach. They were willing to tailor solutions, really collaborate with their clients. It was a big contrast to the more rigid approach of some of the larger companies at the time.
So it wasn't just that they built good tech, they built it in a way that really solved problems for their clients. But there's also this whole thing about their company culture, right? This ND difference, as our sources call it.
Oh, absolutely. It's more than just a buzzword. They had a very flat hierarchy, open communication was encouraged, and they really emphasized individual initiative. I was reading, their book even talks about how lively their canteen culture was. It wasn't just grabbing a quick bite. It was engineers, executives, everyone mingling, debating ideas.
Wait, seriously?
Even playing bridge during their lunch breaks.
Bridge? No way.
Yep. And there's this great anecdote about a huge wooden mosaic that employees created in their spare time, in a dedicated break area, no less. It really speaks to the kind of environment they fostered. It wasn't just a place to work. It was a community of people who were passionate about what they were doing.
So it's like their innovation wasn't just in their technology, it was in how they structured the company itself.
Exactly. And this even extended to their leadership style. They were much more focused on empowering people, trusting them to take ownership of their work rather than, micromanaging every detail.
Okay, so they've got this innovative tech, this unique culture, and they're starting to make a real name for themselves. What was their next move? Did they try to stay focused on Norway, or did they have bigger ambitions?
Ambition might be an understatement. They decided to go global, and they did it strategically. Instead of trying to take on the world all at once, they focused on building strong relationships within specific technical communities. They replicated that model they'd established in Norway. For instance, in Sweden, they partnered with organizations like SCA Atom, a major energy company, and the Swedish Armed Forces. This approach helped them prove their capabilities in new markets, build trust, and gain a foothold without overextending themselves.
That's smart. But what about places like the US? You know, the heart of the tech world at that time. Did they even try to compete there?
They did. And you know what? They found success there too. Even against bigger, more established players, ND managed to carve out a space for themselves.
Wow. How did they pull that off? I mean, wasn't the US market already saturated with tech companies?
It was, but remember, they were very focused on software quality and building those long-term customer relationships. They were known for being agile, responsive, and willing to go the extra mile to meet their clients' needs. And in a market that can sometimes feel impersonal, that kind of approach can be a huge differentiator.
So everything seems to be going incredibly well for ND at this point. They've got the tech, the culture, the global reach. It's almost like a fairy tale.
Almost.
But, we know how these stories usually go. There's got to be a but come in, right?
There is. By the mid-1980s, cracks began to appear. The tech world was changing rapidly, and ND, despite its early success, would soon face a series of challenges that would test its very foundations.
Welcome back, everyone. When we left off, Norsk Data seemed to be, well, on top of the world. But as we all know, even the most successful companies can stumble. What exactly were those challenges that started to emerge in the mid-1980s?
Well, this is where the tech landscape really starts to shift under their feet. You have to remember, back then, software compatibility between different computer brands, it wasn't as common as it is today. ND, like a lot of companies, built their systems with proprietary software. Worked great within their ecosystem, but
it was like a walled garden, right? If you wanted to use ND computers, you were pretty much locked into using their software, their way of doing things.
Exactly. But around the mid-80s, there's this rising tide of what are called open standards. Essentially, this means different companies agree on common ways for their computers to talk to each other, share data, run the same software. It was a game changer for the whole industry.
So if you're a customer, suddenly you're not limited to just one company's products. You have choices, flexibility. You're not locked into a single vendor. I can see why that would be appealing. But for a company like ND, that's a huge challenge, right? Their whole model was built on that closed ecosystem.
Exactly. And this is where you see those cracks starting to appear. ND was slow to embrace these open standards, specifically the rise of UNIX-based systems. Now, you might be wondering, why the resistance? Weren't they known for being innovative?
That's what I was thinking. They were so successful with their own technology. Maybe there was a bit of not invented here syndrome going on. Like, why change what's already working?
That's part of it. But there were also technical factors at play. Their existing systems, they were complex, optimized for their own hardware and software. Switching to an open standard like UNIX, it would have required a massive overhaul, not just of their products, but their internal development processes too.
So they're facing this external pressure to adapt to open standards, but they're also dealing with these internal challenges of trying to shift their whole way of doing things.
It sounds like a perfect storm brewing.
It was. And on top of that, you have to remember, this is a company with a very distinct culture. Flat hierarchy, decentralized decision-making, which had been huge strengths for them in the past.
Right, all those bridge games, those employee-built mosaics, it all pointed to a company that really valued collaboration and individual initiative.
But in a crisis, you sometimes need a different kind of leadership. Their traditional consensus-driven approach, which worked so well when things were going smoothly, it started to become a liability. They needed to be more decisive, move faster. But that went against their ingrained cultural norms.
So you've got this clash between the need to adapt quickly and their established culture, which, while very positive in many ways, was making it difficult for them to pivot. Exactly. And this internal struggle is happening at the same time they're trying to catch up with the technology race. They realized they couldn't ignore the rise of UNIX, so they made a difficult decision, start incorporating machines from other vendors into their offerings.
Wow, that's a big admission. It's like saying, we can't do it all ourselves anymore.
It was a humbling move, and honestly a necessary one. But it also created a perception problem. Customers who were used to ND being the, cutting-edge innovator, they started to wonder, can they still keep up? Are they falling behind?
And this perception issue, it's not just about customer confidence, right? It's also about employee morale. If you're working at ND, seeing the company having to resell someone else's technology, that's got to be a blow.
Absolutely. It's a sign that the company is struggling, that their core competency is being challenged.
So they're trying to adapt their technology, navigate this cultural shift, but what about their overall strategy? Do they try to focus their efforts, maybe specialize in certain market segments where they still had a strong advantage?
Unfortunately, no. They continued with their broad approach, trying to cater to a wide range of customer needs, from scientific research to industrial automation. This made it difficult for them to develop the kind of deep expertise and tailored solutions that were becoming increasingly important in this, new, more specialized market.
It's like they were spreading themselves too thin, trying to be everything to everyone at a time when focus was becoming crucial. And I imagine all of this was happening against a backdrop of financial pressure, right? Investors getting nervous, shareholders asking tough questions.
Absolutely. The financial strain was mounting. They initiated cost-cutting measures, implemented hiring freezes, and ultimately they resorted to layoffs. This was a truly painful period for the company and its employees, many of whom had been with ND for years, had contributed to its success.
And layoffs, they don't just affect the people who lose their jobs. They send shockwaves through the entire organization. Morale plummets. People start looking over their shoulders, wondering, am I next?
And it's not just internal, right?
Yeah.
Their relationships with their partners, those software developers, resellers, all those people who were part of their ecosystem, that all starts to fray as well.
Because ND's struggles become their struggles. Delays, budget cuts, it all trickles down. So we're at this point where they're losing key partners, customer confidence is shaky, and they're still grappling with how to adapt to this new tech landscape. What happens next? Was there a moment where they realized, okay, we need a radical change?
There was. In 1989, after a series of, disappointing financial results, Rolf Skar, the CEO who had led ND through those incredible growth years, steps down.
Was this a voluntary move or was he pushed out?
There's some debate about that, but the fact is, new leadership was brought in with a mandate to try and salvage the situation. Eric Engebretsen, who had a strong financial background, took the helm.
So new CEO, new strategy, new organizational structure. Did any of this actually work?
Well, that's a complex question. And Gretsen initiated a radical restructuring, dividing ND into separate business units, each responsible for its own profits and losses. It was a drastic move away from their traditional decentralized approach.
It sounds like they were trying to create more accountability, more focus. Did it have the intended effect?
In some ways, yes, but it also created new problems. The business units were forced to compete with each other for resources and customers, leading to internal rivalries and a loss of that collaborative spirit that had been so important to ND's identity.
It's almost like they swung too far in the other direction, from a very flat structure to a very siloed one, and I imagine that confused their employees even more.
It did. It felt like the company was losing its soul, its sense of purpose. They launched initiatives like the Marketplace, which aimed to make the company more, market-oriented. But it felt forced and out of touch with their core values.
So, all of this is happening in 1989 and 1990. They're restructuring, launching new initiatives, trying desperately to turn things around. But the big question is, did they manage to stop the bleeding? Were these changes enough to get them back on track, or were they just delaying the inevitable? Welcome back, everyone. We've reached, kind of the final chapter in the story of Norsk Data, early 1990s now, and they've gone through this radical restructuring, internal conflicts, and they're still trying to find their footing in a tech world that's rapidly leaving them behind.
It's a crucial point in their story, because they're at a crossroads. They've made these big changes. But the question is, are they enough to actually save the company?
So what does this new Norsk Data actually look like? What are they doing to try and stay relevant?
Well, they're making a big push to embrace those open standards we talked about, right? Launching a new line of UNIX-based systems, trying to appeal to customers who are looking for that flexibility, that compatibility. But here's the catch. Their existing customers, many of whom were, deeply invested in these proprietary systems, they're hesitant to make the switch.
It's that classic innovator's dilemma, isn't it? You've got your loyal customer base, but they're stuck on the old tech. And you're trying to attract new customers with your, shiny new systems, but they're not sure if you can really deliver. It's a tough spot to be in.
Exactly. And ND's attempts to bridge that gap, to offer some kind of smooth migration path from their old systems to the new UNIX-based ones, well, it just wasn't convincing enough. The market had lost confidence in their ability to keep up, to innovate.
And can you blame them? The company had gone through so much upheaval, so many changes. It's understandable that customers would be wary.
Absolutely. And this all plays into their biggest problem, their financial situation. It continues to deteriorate. They're burning through cash, trying desperately to find a winning formula, but it's like they're running out of time.
So what happens next? Do they try to merge with another company, get acquired, or do they just, I don't know, fade away, give us the ending?
Unfortunately, none of those rescue attempts materialize. They explore various options, partnerships, acquisitions, but by the early 90s, none of it is enough to, reverse the tide. The company shrinks dramatically and eventually, well, it ceases to exist as we once knew it.
It's a sad ending to a story that started with so much promise. This small Norwegian company that took on the giants, built this unique culture, and achieved some remarkable things. What do you think ultimately led to their demise?
I think on the surface, it's tempting to say they were simply a victim of disruption, right? They were slow to embrace open standards, lost their agility, and failed to keep pace with the rapid innovation happening around them. And those are all valid points. But if you dig a little deeper, I think there's a more nuanced lesson here.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What's the deeper lesson?
I think it's about the importance of strategic focus. In their pursuit of growth and global expansion, they spread themselves too thin. They tried to be everything to everyone. And in the process, they lost sight of what made them truly special.
That makes sense. It's like they were so caught up in chasing every opportunity that they forgot to ask themselves, what are we truly great at? Where can we make the biggest impact?
Exactly. They lacked that clear vision for the future, that niche where they could really excel and dominate. And in a rapidly changing market, that lack of focus, well, it can be fatal.
So what does this all mean for us, for anyone listening who's trying to build something new, create a successful company, a project? What can we learn from Norsk Data's rise and fall?
Well, I think there are several key takeaways. First, agility and adaptability are absolutely crucial in today's world, right? Things change so quickly, you need to be able to pivot, adjust your strategy, embrace new technologies, new approaches. Second, you need to have a deep understanding of your market, your customers, and what they truly need. Don't just chase every trend, focus on solving real problems. And finally, you need a clear vision, a strategic focus. Figure out what you're truly great at, what sets you apart, and build your strategy around that.
It's a powerful reminder that even the most successful companies are vulnerable if they lose sight of these fundamentals. But it's also a story of incredible innovation, a testament to what's possible when talented people come together with a shared purpose.
Exactly. Norsk Data's story may be a cautionary tale, but it's also an inspiration. It reminds us that even small companies can achieve great things, challenge the status quo, and make a real impact on the world. But to do so, they need to be adaptable, strategic, and always focused on delivering true value to their customers.
Well said. It's been a fascinating deep dive into the rise and fall of Norsk Data, a company that for a brief time shone brightly on the global tech stage. Their story is full of valuable lessons for anyone navigating the, complexities of building and sustaining success in a world that's constantly evolving. Thanks for joining us on this journey.